that's to say, having being able to meet with a writing community is a really great privilege. I just want to talk about how I became a writer, and then we'll move into questions and keep things really simple. And I won't give the whole long. We're going to be out 3:30, so I don't want to give the whole biography. But basically, in 1977, my parents were together. They were on a date. It was very romantic. 9 months later, I was born. No, I'm just kidding. But I always wanted to be a writer since I was a little kid. I'm about in fourth grade. Just figured out that I loved telling stories and I loved creating. This was like the only homework assignments in elementary school that I ever completed. I think in first grade I never saw the sun because my teacher would, you go to school, it's dark, and then my teacher would never let me go to recess because I didn't get any of my math worksheets done. Were all these things like a picture of a color television, which when I do talks for schools, I have to explain to the kids the significance of a color television in those days. And then a picture of a record, and then I have to explain what a record player is. And then like price tag on the TV, 10 cents. Record player, 5 cents. And I was only in first grade, didn't understand much about the world, but I knew right, yeah, no, I can't buy a television for a dime, right? So right away I had this deep suspicion of math and never got anything done. But when their story was the assignment, when we could write and create something, that I dug into that to the exclusion of all else. So I wanted to be a writer for a long time, and I thought I should go to college. That was kind of the expectation. It was like, parents didn't go to college, didn't have a lot of advice. It was just go to college. Well, why? Go to college. Okay. Went to college, University of Iowa, to major in English. Turned out that was expensive, and my father was helping me to pay for my school, and I worked with him he was a natural gas pipeliner like his father before him, and I worked with him one summer and figured out how, like what he had to do to, like the physical work that he had to do in order to buy that Nintendo in 1988 with the power pad anyway, and I didn't want him to have to pay for my school, I wanted to do it myself. So I joined the Iowa Army National Guard, which I knew nothing about, but they said it would pay for college. And I also thought that all Army jobs would be equally horrible. When I talk to kids, like, gentlemen, if you're gonna enlist, make sure you understand I signed up as a combat engineer, didn't know what it was. I just wanted to get back I wanted to go to basic training, job training, back to college in the fall on time. And so the guy's like, how about combat engineer? Sure. Turns out combat engineers work with explosives and landmines. I'm like, okay, I guess this is what I'll learn. Much, much later, turns out that a knowledge of explosives, depending on the book you're writing, this doesn't work very well in like romantic comedies and that kind of thing. But if you're writing like a Civil War trilogy, it's very helpful for your young soldiers to be able to rig explosives. So it turned out handy. But then, 9/11 happened and the National Guard changed. Months later, I found myself in this place called Afghanistan. And I was in my early 20s, and I had written a novel manuscript adapted from a story concept that I thought of in sixth grade as an assignment. The idea just stuck with me. And I had sent it out to some agents. I didn't really know what to do after I wrote the book. How would I ever get this published? I have no clue. I don't even know how I figured out what an agent, a literary agent is. Or where I must have been like a Writer's Digest magazine or something. So I sent this in, and this manuscript was not ready. It was not ready. But I didn't have the knowledge about writing and revision necessary to understand that it's not ready. You ever have something wrong in your house? Like something's broken, or a gash in the wall, or a rip in the carpet, and you're thinking, I gotta fix that. Then you're busy, or you don't have money or whatever. Eventually you kind of stop seeing it, right? Like, it kind of just blends in, and you don't even notice it. That's kind of how the problems were in this manuscript. But I got called to the war, and I thought, oh Lord, why? I was getting slightly better rejection letters in my mind. Like the first was a literal rubber stamp on my own letter. It was a paper letters. This was '03, right? And a literal rubber stamp. Next, they sent back a form letter, which I thought was slightly better. Then a very slightly personalized rejection. I thought, if this trend continues, it's inevitable. No, it was not inevitable for anything. I thought, Lord, why did I get sent to this war? Because my publishing career, my writing career was just getting going. There are many reasons, but one of the reasons why I'm glad that I'm not like the Lord of the universe is I don't have the patience for the job. Because here I was whining, and fortunately, I had been forced to stop sending out these rejections. You read the articles and it says you should expect rejections, right? Like you're going to get a lot of rejections. It's part of the game. So I would have kept sending that thing out and just burning that bridge and turning away that publisher, that agent, that editor, because it wasn't ready and I didn't know. But when I got to the war, I was busy and couldn't work on it anymore. So that, I thought it was bad, turned out to be great. We encountered our mission in Afghanistan. My unit's mission was to assist with the reconstruction effort to help Afghan people to rebuild their country and make something better. In particular, we like to work on schools, young kids, especially young girls who had it really rough. And in those days, '04, '05, there was still a lot of hope. We did not know that the betrayal was that they were going to throw away our entire mission and turn away all those and leave our interpreters behind to die. We didn't know that yet. We encountered this young girl who suffered from birth from a cleft lip. So her top of her mouth, not cleft palate, that's different. Cleft lip, and so her lip was split, and her teeth stuck out straight forward through it, and so she can't eat correctly, she can't speak correctly, and she's not going to be very marriageable, which is a big problem for a young Afghan girl, even when things were going very well before the betrayal. And we knew we had to help her somehow, but the Army, they weren't going to. We had a surgeon at our main base, an Army surgeon who could fix it, but they weren't going to send a helicopter for this one girl. So we had to pass the hat, take money out of our own paychecks to ship this girl to our main air base for the surgery. And she came. I didn't understand what cleft lip was. It was a disturbing thing to look at, and I didn't understand that medical science knew how to fix this. And it happens everywhere. I mean, I was naive and ignorant, and it happens all over America. We just fix it right away. She came back and totally transformed. I'm like, oh, it's just a little bitty scar, and there's some stuff on it so it wouldn't get infected. And wow. And you know, she's doomed, but to see her smile, to be able to just smile, just normal, because she was so shy about it and everything. Now I've got this, my face is fatter these days, but when I was younger, my face is really small, and you see this big deformed. Right. You know what? When you get a nose like this fixed, they call it a rhinoplasty. It's already bad enough, right? And to call the procedure after the rhino seems so cruel. And I obviously haven't received a rhinoplasty in my life. And I got made fun of, and I felt bad, but I wasn't as bad as this girl. And we were able to help her out. Last time I saw her, she was leaving our base. She was on a truck leaving. She can't understand English or hear me. I mean, she's pretty far away. But I made a promise. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I will figure out a way to tell them your story. People need to know what that girl had to endure, and what the mission in Afghanistan were. And in the Army, you don't make a lot of promises. Like if you make one, you have to keep that. One time, these machine guns were going off, and my team leader and I, we ran up on top of the flat roofs in Afghanistan, flat mud roofs with a wall around the edge. So we run up on the wall, and he says, "I got this way." I said, "Okay, I'll cover this way." And you cannot turn around no matter what happens on your life, because that guy's counting on you. So you keep promises, but it's a hard promise to keep, because I've never been an Afghan, and I've never been a 13-year-old girl. But I just felt like I had to do that. I couldn't let her down. How many times in her life has she been let down? Over and over. I started working on this novel. Also, I thought I was going to have all this extra college money. Now, I did get my college money when I signed up for my undergraduate. But I thought that there's a post 9/11 thing that I would get grad school funds, which I didn't. That's okay. And I found this. I found a grad school, so I went and pursued my Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing for Children and Young Adults at Vermont College of Fine Arts in Montpelier. It's a low residency program. It was. I don't even know if it exists anymore, and I wouldn't recommend it anymore for a lot of complicated reasons. But you go there 10 days a year, or 10 days a semester, twice a year, and the rest of the time you work correspondence with a writer, which I think is a better model. Writers don't go to classrooms and lectures every day. They got to figure out how to write at home, where they're going to write, how they're going to write. And I started to write this novel, this crazy idea, and I kept working on it. Then it was just really fun. While I was in the war, I should mention this, because this is a self-publishing and authors group. There was this huge book. Well, this was 2004. Okay, I'm going to say this several times. This is 2004, a very different time. And there's this book. What's it called? Somebody's Guide to Publishing and Editors, and it was really cool. It had all these listings of these agents, and with like these agents presumably filled out this questionnaire, like what they're looking for, what they're not looking for, what they represent. Also, there was a handy essay in the front, the title of which was something like, "What the heck is a literary agent? How does any of this work?" I had no clue. I'm like, oh, but this is sweet. This guy was explaining everything. There was an interview, I think, with an agent or an editor, it doesn't matter, who was saying, an MFA, kind of interested in that. If I hear someone's got an MFA, I might take another look at their manuscript. If they say they're self-published, I probably wouldn't look at their manuscript enough. Now, again, that was 2004, and that's, we had the internet, but we didn't, in 2004, we didn't live on the internet like now. It was a very different time. There were no ebooks, there was no Kindle or whatever. Audiobooks were harder in those days. We had to have a CD in them, at least a CD, if they were still making them on cassettes. Oh, I hated cassette audiobooks. I loved the audiobooks. Remember, there's like 10 tapes, and you got to remember which side of the tape you were on, and you could never figure it out. It was horrible. And so, again, digital audiobooks changes everything. And so this is how clueless I was, sort of reading this book. And what happened was I went back for an alumni special retreat weekend at my grad school, mostly, my wife is not here, mostly to just kind of party, just have drinks with my grad school friends. I didn't even know that I called from the hallway phone, by the way. I called my wife and said, yeah, there's agents here and stuff. So this is totally productive, and I hadn't known that. I just went for the party. But then I was kind of intense. I was kind of nervous because okay, there's an agent's going to be in that room, and there's another agent that's going to be like downstairs in the other room, and this agent's going to be in the corner over there, and you can go talk to him. But you weren't supposed to pitch. I don't understand how so I was just very nervous. It was like junior high. It was like going to the junior high skating party when the guy declares a couple skate, and then we go, I don't even want a couple skate. I want to play some video games. And felt terrible about yourself. It got better. But, so I was feeling very nervous around. And this one agent was sitting in the corner of this big room, so I'll go over there. So I just basically say, I don't really know how these things work, because I just started being an agent, so I don't know how these things work. And then I think we didn't even talk about my book at all. And then just kind of had a pleasant conversation, and then later there was a party, and I barely talked to her again. But the point was, she's closed to submit unsolicited submissions, unless she met you at a thing, which our conversation counted. So I sent her a query over the email. I sent a pitch. Query letters are impossible to write. You guys talked about query letters. Oh my gosh. If I ever get divorced, I'll be so terrible at dating. You can just tell just by watching this show, right? Like, oh, and if I ever have to get another agent, I can't. Oh, I dread the query letters. If anyone says it's easy, they are lying. And I was a teacher. I was a high school English teacher in those days, and they had these internet filters that they purchased from the People's Republic of China, so that you couldn't do anything with the computers. Like, we got a 21st century global technology. Like, then you have to allow email. Like, they kept talking about technology for the kids so they learn about it, but the computers don't do anything because you got them shut down. Anyway, so I couldn't like check my own email while I was at school. I had to wait until I got home. Got home and there was an email from this, and my wife was talking to me about something, and you never do this, never, and she's like, oh, I can't remember what it was. I'm like, quiet, shut up a second, hang on. She's like, what, excuse me? I was like, just, and this was like the agent saying, yeah, let's talk. And I read your manuscript and I cried more than once. And it was the Afghan story, and I'd like to talk about it. And my Amanda said, I read about some agents do phone rejections. Phone rejections. What kind of agent would ever, I mean, especially these days, you'd be lucky to get a rejection at all. They just say, if you don't hear from me, then you're rejected. No, that's unprofessional. But phone rejection, who would take the time for that? Anyway, so we signed up, and then so it was kind of blowing my mind. I had an agent, and then I thought it was a really long wait. And if you go back and check, it feels like a long wait when you know that you've got an agent that's got your manuscript out with real publishers, like some of the big crazy ones. Feels like a long wait. It was like 2 or 3 months, so I got really lucky. I don't have a cellular telephone now because I hate them, but in those days I had a little flip phone that my wife tricked me into getting, which I left shut off while I worked, and then I stayed late that night checking some papers. And the kid, I thought I was down on myself. Face it, Reedy, you're going to spend the rest of your life teaching English, and the kids are never going to understand what a damn adverb is. I mean, it's got the word verb right in it, kids. Figure it out, modifies the verb, and they would never get it, and I would check these papers for the rest of my life. I was going to go home early that day and try to write. And I too many papers to grade. Then I turned on my phone, was giving up on grading for the night. And there was a message from like 3 o'clock that day from my agent. I have it recorded on my computer. It's like, Trent, you're probably teaching right now. Give me a call. I have some news for you. If you have an agent, always make sure you have your agent's phone number. And don't ever go anywhere without it, because you never, like, if you got a call, you got to make sure that you can be in touch. And I didn't have her number, so I had to call home, tell my wife, go on, let's find this number, and then call. And I got her daughter, and her daughter's like, oh, she's not here. She'll be back like in an hour. Like an hour. But she called back not long after and said, we have a publication offer from Arthur A. Levine Books at Scholastic, the people who do Harry Potter in America. And I said, well, what does an offer mean? Like, what's that? She says, they're going to publish your book. Yeah, in those days we had a budget problem, so the janitor only cleaned the rooms on this side of the hallway on one night, and then he cleaned the rooms on the other side of the hallway the next night. And my filthy floor was on an off night. Well, I didn't care. I threw myself down in the dirt and gave thanks to the Lord for this dream of mine for coming true at last. And excuse me one second. And that was what led to my first novel, Words in the Dust, which sold okay, sold pretty well, but the crazy part was they called me to go to New York to do the Today Show for the Al Roker's Book Club for Kids, which I don't know if you like the Today Show. I'm not really a fan. I mean, it's on. Someone must watch it, but it's supposed to be like 4 million people watching. I was thinking 4 million people. And it was terrifying, you know. It was like 7 minutes. I don't know. I can't watch it. I mean, I did fine without that and stuttering and whatever. You know, I did okay, but I was terrified. And then, like, there's no delay on the East Coast, so you drop a curse, that's like a $250,000 FCC fine. That's on you, buddy. Yeah, you got it. and yeah, like interviews with LA Times and the Chicago Tribune, and it was, and I didn't understand that the publisher, they're like, we want you to come to the American Library Association convention in San Diego and participate with these other authors in this talk. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. Things are kind of tight right now. We just moved to the state of Washington from Iowa, and I don't know if we have the funds. And they're like, well, no, we're going to fly you out here. Like, this is all on us. Oh. And I just come from the Army and very small town public education. So you're at these dinners. Like if you have a meeting, a teacher meeting at the school, maybe they include a lunch on a lucky day, and maybe there's a milk, but you ask for a second milk, superintendent would be like, whoa, that milk's all budgeted, son. You can't be having seconds on the milk. But when you do these publishing things, they'd be like, martini? I don't know, it's all comped. It was insane. And it's not a trip like, listen to all these fun things. There's a British publisher, I should mention, in my first book, Words in the Dust, because I guess they have to, it's all in English, but the way the laws are, they have to pay you again and republish it in England. I don't know, but then they're like, oh, we'd like you to come out to England, and I can't do it, but and do shows there. So they flew me to, it was so nice to go to a foreign country without a rifle. Which was a change of pace for me. You know, it's just always in the way. You gotta remember where it is all the time, and it's just better to not have it for a lot of reasons. Besides, but and the point is not to sit here like, oh, I did all these things. The point is like, you might encounter writers who are, or I do anyway. They're waiting until they get published so they can be somebody. They're not interested in, they may not even have written the book. They might even have a chapter. And they're like, well, I'm gonna be somebody. I'm gonna be a famous writer. I'm like, well, I hope so, buddy, but you should start by writing the first chapter at least. The experience, like, there's a lot of ups and downs. You don't arrive at this level. Like I meet people, I'm like, you're headed for heartbreak. If you're gonna hang your self-worth, and your identity is going to be dependent on some kind of external measure of your career or whatever, that you're going to be headed for a heartbreak, as Winger used to say in, I think, 1989. It's a great song. I know I'm a little over time on this first segment, but I just want to mention this. I also brought this Enduring Freedom book. It's not a sales pitch. It'd be awesome if you wanted to buy it. I met a young Afghan named, we'll call him Jawad Arash for now. It's not his name, but for the security purposes. And we became friends while I was serving there. And he really learned his English, and he got a degree. And it's a long story, but we decided to write this book together. This Enduring Freedom is basically the novelization of the war in Afghanistan, what we're trying to do. So this is two young guys from very different backgrounds who find common cause in an unlikely friendship. And we published this in May of 2021 so that it would be on time for the 20th anniversary of the beginning of the war in Afghanistan. And we did not know that the betrayal of Afghanistan and the betrayal of everything that we did, sacrificed for and fought for, was coming. We did not know that for the next 2 years, Jawad Arash was going to live on the run, fearing for his life from the Taliban psychopaths that had been unleashed upon him for no reason. So this is, the writing becomes a really personal thing in ways that I never imagined. Like, I can't show Jawad Arash's picture online. Taliban spies are everywhere. So this book cover image has sort of become like a stand-in for pictures. Like when I post on the www.facebook.com, if you've heard of that one, and I'm going to post to our readers or to other interested people who are trying to help my co-author. Then I put this picture up, and we'll let them know most recent disappointment in our quest to get him someplace safe. It's been an utter nightmare. We have some glimmers of hope, but I'm not even going to tell you about them, because every time they happen, they just crumble. So I just never imagined that the writing would become like such a. It's always personal, right? We're always personally invested in our books and in our stories and these characters, right? And these stories are coming from a place in our heart that matters a lot of the times. But I never imagined that I would, like, that writing this book was going to be basically enlisting in a whole new war, except with one where we're helpless and have no weapons. But you know, I have hopes that we will, Juadarash's student visa will come through. And let me tell you something, then we're going to do another book show. I'm going to call you guys and be like, look, I'm going to come do a book show. You're like, we didn't invite you. Like, you're going to want to hear this guy. You're going to want to, you want to hear from this writer. You want to talk about a guy that suffers from his art. Taliban find out he wrote this, it's all over for him, his family, his parents, all of them. So I have that hope, and I hope one day that he and I can do this show together in person, sign books together. It would be great. So that's my process. That's what writing is about. That's what I've found out in the 13 years and 11 novels that I've been in this process. Does anybody have any questions for me? This part makes me nervous because I do schools, right? Does anybody have any questions? And no one wants to raise their hand, and I'm up here, and it's awkward. So I always have trained myself to take a very long time like this, preparing people to be able to have the time to think if they have a question, so that I'm not just standing here like a. Thank you for rescuing me from that. What's that question?
How much does Enduring Freedom cost? That's a simple one.
That is a good question. I do not. It's got to be written on there, right? It's the hardcover is $18.95. I don't know if it's in paperback yet. I should find. I did write the thing. I should find out. I've been busy trying to save the author's life. So, yeah, about $20, $18.95 for the Enduring Freedom. Yeah, go ahead.
How can we help?
Join me on the Facebook, if you ever do, www.facebook.com. It gets a laugh about a quarter of the time, that joke, so that's all I have is lame jokes. I'm sorry about that. But join me on there. I have some updates. Once in a while, I need donations for, like, and I always think, like, okay, if we just have this much money, we get these plane tickets, we get them out of there. But then it's like, oh no, you can't go. But thank you for caring. I mean, people just don't care. I'm like, what? I don't even want to be involved in it. I'm tired of it. What am I going to do? Just say, like, hey, thanks for the money from that book, now go die. I mean, he spent all his advance building a house in Afghanistan. It's all just gone. I mean, he had to sell it for like nothing. Or if he couldn't sell it, Taliban will just rewrite the papers and say, oh, this belongs to our friend. It's gone. And he worked so hard on that book. So thank you for caring. That's one thing. I appreciate you caring about this, because it gets to be isolating working on this every day when no one cares. Thank you. Thanks for saving me again.
Can you tell us just briefly about your children's book series? You said you have a series?
A couple of like trilogies.
Okay.
This is the third book in the McCall Mountain series. They are very loosely related. The idea was that you didn't have to read them all. Like, you can read book 3 and you'd be okay. You don't have to go back there and read. You ever find a book, you're like, oh, this looks so good. It's book 16. I don't have time to back up and read 16 books. And these are just outdoor sporting life adventures, like middle grade people who like to hunt and fish and snowmobiling. And they're set in McCall, a fictionalized McCall, Idaho, because I wanted them to be like, you ever go to McCall? It's a wonderful place. But like in Iowa, if you get lost in the woods, if you can walk in a straight line, you will find a power line or a road or a fence. If you wander out of McCall, right, if you pick straight line, I don't care. If it's the wrong straight line, you're gonna die. It's like you will just keep going. There's millions of acres. You're doomed. So I wanted it to be out in the hardcore wilderness, not like the fake Iowa wilderness. And I also have the Divided We Fall series. It's a young adult story about the second and final American Civil War. It's set in the 2020s, and it's about what happens if the sort of two sides in America stop trying to work things out with words and by laws and procedures and voting and just start shooting. And that's also set in Idaho, but just over the line in, I call it Freedom Lake, but the real town is like Spirit Lake. Is that a town? Yeah,
Yeah,
Spirit
yeah,
Lake.
it
It's basically, it's basically set there. So, but there's a lot of like action in Spokane. And anyways, well, that was a fun one. It's pretty violent. I'm writing for teenagers, and I didn't want to make war sound like a fun video game where the bodies just sort of delete themselves after a while. My mistake with that was putting in swears. Now, don't take the name of the Lord in vain, and there's no F words, there's no C bombs, but people get mad about the swearing, which fine. I mean, like, raise your kids how you want. I mean, you want to take my book? The first book in this series was a friend of mine saw it withdrawn from a library, almost certainly because nobody was checking it out, so they just what they call weeded it, right? It wasn't banned. I mean, but even if it was, even if they're like hunting, these kids are carrying guns. We don't want this in our library. Fine. I don't have a special right to have my book in your library. It's not bad. Anyone can read it. You can download it in seconds from the internet out in the woods in some place, not necessarily outside of McCall or someplace, but people walk around outside and download. That's not banned. So I'm like, you should tolerate swearing in the books. But it was weird how many would object to the swearing and the sex. There's not even sex in it. Like, it cuts away, leaving it open to the young reader to decide for his or herself how far they go. But they never objected to the violence. There was never, and they're usually moms, I guess. I don't know. They're swearing. I'm like, yes. He also shoots this guy in the chest deliberately to kill him. And you don't seem to have a problem with that, and that's fine, I guess. But I mean, we get to ask ourselves something, I think, America, why we're so comfortable with like a lot of violence. But the curses, ooh, they're so offensive. I don't know. I don't have an answer. Go ahead.
Crazy. Any other
What kind of
questions for me?
spawned your first children's book? Or
Say
young-
again?
What kind of spawned your first YA novel?
Oh, so my first several books, my first two books were middle grade. It was the Afghan book I mentioned, and also that book that I was trying to publish that came from the story idea from when I was in sixth grade. And I rewrote it actually from the ground up. Even the rewrite that I did when I was in my early 20s. When I came back and saw it after I'd been through the publication process for my first novel, I saw that old manuscript. It's never going to work on a lot of levels. I just have to start over. It can't be saved. And then it was actually after the Today Show, and then we went back to Scholastic CentCom and to my editor's office, which was very different than I thought it was going to be, because I have a bad concept of New York. I thought she would be like pressing a button all the time. Send them in, send them in. It doesn't really work that way. And she's like, how would you like to write this book for us? And they had this whole pitch, this whole concept. She's like, you can adapt it and change it, here and there, but we're kind of looking for it. And that turned out to be my novel, If You're Reading This, which was designed to be like a really clean, when I say clean, it doesn't have swears, it doesn't have sexual content, the characters don't drink or anything. super hard book to work on. In fact, if I had not already spent the advance, I would have like given back the contract. Like, I'm out. I can't. So hard. It was so hard. My wife always knew when I was working on that book because I would be swearing. This is before I was a dad. So I'd be in my office, mother, this stupid, what the, I just fixed. And it would never, I was getting frustrated. But by the time I did like a major overhaul for the 8th time, and I would like file to save as version 3 file, so that if I messed up the version, I could always go back to the previous way that I had it. When I do talks at schools, I have to make sure that I'm pronouncing version very clearly. Bad senses of humor. I want to present a strong abstinence message while I'm doing my talk. And by the time I got to version 9, I said, hang on a minute, this is okay. This might work. And then that was my first started review. And actually, people keep buying that book and reading it. And it's getting to be old. I think it was published in 2014. But then I had this Civil War concept. What was happening was it was Easter and I was driving to church. You know how Spokane is kind of close to Idaho? And it's like the first time I lived like that close to a state line, which isn't that big of a deal. But I just had like, what if 90 was closed, man, and like militarily with blockades on you're not crossing this line. Whoa. What if there was a kid like in the Guard, National Guard, and he had to be at an overwatch position, making sure no one crosses that line. I kept driving to church, and it kept being Easter. To get to church, all right, Reedy, all right, there's things you got to pay attention to. This is serious stuff. Pay attention and do what you're supposed to do. I could not stop thinking about this. Well, why would the state line ever be closed? What would it close down for? So I kind of feel who is this kid? And it was a really, really cool idea, but I knew it was going to be too much plot to have in one book. If you have too much plot in one book, then it all becomes told, right? Like a summary. So I was like, I'm going to pitch for a 3, and this was in the glory days of young adult. I mean, Harry Potter movies were still rolling out, or they just had finished that, and the Hunger Games was selling a zillion copies, and they had all those books coming out, and there was like these divergent books, and it was a great time. It was a great time in Kidlit. It's not that way now, but so like, you know what? I told my agent, I'm going to prepare this proposal. It's like, I'm going to pitch for these 3 books, and then they had an agency retreat at a place called Port Ludlow. I think that's what it's called in Washington, so we were all there, and that happened to be the weekend that the Scholastic was due to have them, what do they call that? Acquisitions meeting. So like marketing is, I've never been to one of these meetings. Certainly not for my own book. That would be all in my mind. Marketing is there, editorial is there, all kinds of people there. Do you think we should offer a deal for publication of this book? So I'm at this retreat, and there's like meetings like this, talking about writing, talking about the business, and I was trying real hard not to think about the meeting that was going to happen. It was like a 3-book deal. That's at least 3 years of solid work. That's like a dream thing. And we were like all out of dinners on this little porch. Look around, hey, where did my agent go? And the other agent from the agency is like, I don't know, Trent. I think she went to take a call. Oh, heavens. And then, they came back, and so it was great fun. I love writing those books. Should not have put the swears in, because nobody ever misses them, right? Okay, soldiers, I got bad news for you. Moms that object to swearing in the books and also support the troops, your nation is defended by the most foul-mouthed people. You can't even write it in a book. It can't be done because there's so much swearing. When we were near the end of our tour in Afghanistan, me and my close friends in my unit, we would get a cigar when one of us was on the guard tower, and we'd talk about things and everything. But near the end of the tour, we talked about, there wasn't that many stories left to go. And we just kind of like, well, can't wait to get out of this place, It was just, I mean, there's that much where those pauses would be F-bombs. And so you can't represent accurately the swears, okay? Nobody has complained in this. So this is, in one sense, this is very realistic because a lot of the missions are based directly on stuff that really happened, right? But in another sense, it's profoundly unrealistic because none of the soldiers in this book say any swear words, right?
What?
They don't swear. These soldiers in here don't curse. But nobody comes and says, well, this book is terrible because there's not enough swears. But on that young adult trilogy, which was a great series that explored interesting constitutional issues, right? Supposing it's all centered on this national ID card, and instead of having like a cheap, flimsy Social Security card and then a separate card for like food assistance, and that it's all on one thing. Like it's all streamlined right there. And because it's so valuable, there's a chip. So if you lose it, they can track it. But then people are like, no, I'm not going to be tracked by your government spy card. So they argue about it. So Idaho says, no, that federal law does not count in Idaho. We're not going to allow it. The federal government says you don't have the right to decide which. Well, that seems far-fetched, except like look at marijuana laws. Marijuana is illegal. I don't care what any people that love drugs in Spokane tell you. It's federally illegal. But Washington says, oh, we don't care, and the Fed chooses not to do anything about it. And that's fine. But other states look at, say, federal gun laws, and they say, we're not interested in what the federal government has to say about guns. Right? It's like when this happened in Washington with the drugs. Obama said, sure, have your drugs. And then like Missouri said, we don't care about your laws about guns. But then Obama said, whoa, hang on a second. You do have to follow these laws. And I don't care if you like guns, and I don't care if you like drugs, or vice versa. But when we start having like, these laws are going to count as real, and these laws are going to be made up, and you guys have to obey these laws, but you guys can choose not, it results in chaos. There's a reason we have like an ordered system. And so that's what some of the constitutional issues behind my young adult trilogy, the Divided We Fall books. But they all got lost because the mom, and it's usually moms, would be like, but there's swears. Yeah, but there's more to it than swears. Like, my son's never heard a swear. Would you keep him in a cell with no internet in the basement? Because if he ever went to a middle school in the United States, yes, he heard swears. Forget middle school. If he ever made it to the 4th grade in a public school in the United States, yes, he heard a lot of swears.
More than that.
But anyway, it's so I don't put swears in my books anymore because I need sales more than I need to prove some kind of swearing point. I don't even care what people think about swears. You're gonna buy the book, then no swears. I will write anything. All about trying to. I gotta make a buck. Any other questions?
Anybody else?
I have.
Thank you.
Do you have any trouble with your editors on maybe saying some of your stuff isn't politically correct or anything like that?
Yeah, that creeps in. Sure, that creeps in, and a lot more lately, especially in books for kids. We got a real. I'm on the internet here. Yeah, there's some of that, and more than there used to be. I don't know. I don't get. I like the Divided We Fall books. I try to keep balance. I did not want to write one of these right-wing books that are always like this. It was like Hank McGrew was a U.S. Marshal, and then the president tried to ban the guns, and that's when he said, "You've gone too far." Civil War. There's a lot of books like this. I'm sure that some of them are awesome. I didn't want to do that, but on the other hand, I did not want to write like a leftist book that made like people who live in rural areas or people who like freedom to be the villain. So I tried to make it, and it is more complicated, whether we like to think so or not, depending on what side we are. One thing that was interested, there's a clause in my contract. I'm talking about writing for young people that says because you're writing for impressionable young people, you have a certain obligation not to. I forget how it's phrased, so I won't try. But the idea was, like, would I be the violent book, would I be helping kids commit violence? I'll give you the example where we back this off. In the Army, I learned a lot about explosives, how to rig them, how to do them. And in one scene, they rig up like a napalm out of diesel and a 50-gallon drum and some det cord and different and some explosives. It can be done. For the guys, no. And not by me, actually. I had to refer to a different a guy who knew more about explosives than me. But it was very detailed. I was like, well, these are kids. Maybe you shouldn't be having all these details. I said, okay, I'll back off the details because we don't need them necessarily. I just want to make it seem authentic. I'll back off the details so to make it harder for a kid to rig this explosive. But also, I don't think it's my responsibility to prevent children from purchasing plastic explosives, right? Somewhere in there, there's got to be, to my knowledge, that's illegal to buy, and that's fine. We don't have to have explosives, and kids certainly shouldn't be buying explosives. Like, I don't know if a kid did this, if it would all be on me. Somebody else dropped the ball on keeping bombs secured. But as far as like keeping things, like avoiding the word fat. Yeah, I think fat's been cut. They're like, oh yeah, don't use the word fat. There's a lot of pressure to like have an even distribution of people with different skin colors, something like that. Like, oh, all your characters are white. Like, it's set in Idaho. Check the Wikipedia on the racial demographics, or just go over to Coeur d'Alene, right? Or for that matter, it's set in Spokane. If I wrote this into a book, this scene, like, well, they're all white in there. Like, yeah, I know, but it doesn't mean it doesn't make it bad. It doesn't make it somehow wrong. There is some pressure for those. And again, I think that I'm speculating that pressure is greater in books for young people because we have slipped into this weird. We have slipped a lot in children's lit. I think we've slipped backwards really into the idea that these books are meant to teach these kids something and make them think something, open their eyes to this idea. Whereas we used to just sort of write really swell stories, like adventure stories, like what kind of social message is Harry Potter trying to get the kids? Don't be an evil wizard, I feel like Kid Lit has moved into we have to teach these kids these ideas. So that, yeah, there's some of that pressure. Yeah, go ahead.
So, as far as this criticism from different sources, how does it manifest it to you as an author? How do you receive these personally, and also, did you say you were self-published?
No.
So you're published by a publisher.
Yeah.
And so, how do they receive the criticism?
Publisher. Okay. Well, one. If I had more sales, it'd probably be a bigger deal. Right? Like essentially nobody knows about fishing and fire. They're going to have, well, they might say that there are too many white people in this book, but again, it's in McCall, Idaho. Go to McCall. It's just that's the demographic, right? If I had a larger reading base, then probably the publisher might be more concerned. Or if I got wrapped up in some kind of scandal, now there's clauses in contracts that say, like, if this writer gets involved in like some kind of online scandal, but some kind of Twitter storm, then we can pull his contract, which is a little bit unfair because you can't always control the Twitter storm.
How, like, you have a website, right?
I do. It's outdated. It's just
So do you get
TrentReedy.com.
criticism on the website?
What's that?
Do you get criticism or you have a Facebook page, so you have
Right.
Followers and stuff?
Yeah, usually would come in. Again, if my books were more known, I guess I'd probably get more of it. I speculate, but some messages would come in through the website, through the contact page. Why do you have swears? One woman was saying, I feel like I'm picking on women, but it's just literally just they to my knowledge they always are. To the best of my memory in these complaints. One was complaining that the Lexile wasn't high enough for the book, so that I should in future go back through and try to manipulate some kind of complex ratio of polysyllabic words to sentence length. And I'm like, I can't even understand what Lexile is. I'm never going to be able to, I can barely get the books done. I'm never going to be able to write these things and meet some kind of target Lexile. And even if I do, there'll just be some other parent that's like, well, my gosh, that's too high of a Lexile for my kid to read. So you can't win there. Some moms said, oh, this is full of swears, or something like that. But I don't get.
So criticism can come from, for a great point, to a great degree, from one person complaining to an organization.
Yeah, I have been pretty blessed. I've avoided a lot of it, not by virtue of actions that I've taken, just by virtue of nobody being aware that I've written books, which has its own problems. But okay, other writers. There's a weird. I'm online. Okay. There's a writer that wrote this great series of books, and it was very successful. Very successful. And did very well. And they're great books. And it was a trilogy, or maybe there were 4 of them, I can't remember. But the writer really did a bold ending. I admired the writer's courage. And it was cool, it worked, and it was unexpected. So then it wasn't the same old thing, and it was really cool. And I went to that writer's Facebook page one day, and it was full of stuff like, oh, I'm your biggest fan. I read all your books, and I have the poster, but then you put that ending on, you are screaming at us. I'm like, then write your own book, man. We've got a real problem in this country about negative reviews. And this is not me saying, oh, my feelings are hurt by negative reviews. They are. Fine. But the people that will come out like, 1 star, because this character didn't go out with this other character in this book like I wanted. That's not up to you to decide, man. Or like, this book is more like an action thriller, and I prefer romances. 1 star. Well, the book's not trying to be a romance. Then go get yourself a romance. If the book fails if a romance novel fails in some way as a romance novel, that's another thing. But to crap on books for like, yeah, this isn't really my genre.
Yeah, it's kind of
Then
like.
don't read it, man. I've gotten a lot of those. Yeah, I'm not really into war books, so yeah, I wasn't.
Kind of like somebody criticizing Larry McMurtry for killing off the best characters.
Right. But on the other hand, they'll read Enduring Freedom. Now, there are subtle clues that this book is about war, and they'll get I'm talking like the
rifle on
Goodreads.
the guys.
Yeah. Oh, as a soldier, look at it's not a rom-com. Okay, I love rom-coms, by the way, incidentally. It's obviously a war book, and they're like, war books aren't really my thing. 1 star. Like, don't read it, man. Oh, this book was all about Thomas Jefferson, and I'm not really interested in history or Thomas Jefferson. Then don't read a Thomas Jefferson book. Yeah, go ahead.
I got to interrupt because we're
We're out of
running out of time. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
no problem.
I really am enjoying this, but we got to. They're kicking us out at 3:30. There's another group coming in, and we got to clean up. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your patience with me. Thanks for listening. I apologize for getting emotional there. I was working on that a little bit, but we'll have better news soon. Thanks a lot.